there's so many different things that I could talk about regarding equity in the COP, equity in climate, so many ways in which equity cross-cuts all of the issues, from the drivers of climate change to the effects, the loss and damages fund, to the pledges and commitments and their implementation. So the inclusion this year of food and health and the first Indigenous Peoples Day are additions that speak to critical concerns linked to human rights, well-being, and livelihoods. That's really important. The fundamental questions here around equity are about who wins and who loses. Who wins and who loses from business as usual, who wins and who loses from the varied kinds of solutions being put forward. Who wins and who loses, and really what's the most key is who decides who's going to win and who's going to lose in any particular situation. So it's clear that there are profits to be made from the failure to address drivers of climate change, like the burning of fossil fuels, and this has to change. There was a report from Oxfam that came out last week showing that the richest 1% of the world's population, 77 million people, produce as much carbon pollution in 2019 as the 5 billion people who make up the poorest 2/3 of the population of the globe. And the richest 10% account for half of emissions. These are huge issues around equity and inequality. We need to tax and discourage the lifestyles of the 1%, maybe starting with their private jets. And we need windfall taxes on oil and gas. I think those would be a nice start. But climate solutions also raise all kinds of equity issues. And they're the ones that avoid real changes, of course, the smoke screens and the greenwashing. But even the serious solutions still raise serious issues of equity and other trade-offs. For example, last week I was at the African Union Conference on Land Policy in Ethiopia. One of the biggest concerns I heard from grassroots actors around private investment in land are the ones related to green solutions, like renewable energy projects, as well as conservation and carbon offsets and carbon trading. And last week it came out that several African countries were selling large amounts of forest land for carbon offsets, apparently something like 20% of the country of Zimbabwe. Other countries were involved as well, selling to a company in Dubai for carbon offsetting. So unfortunately, it sounds to me like we're close to getting back to an era of carbon cowboys. We need to think about whose land this is, what happens to the people living there. Did they have any say over this? What happens to their livelihoods, their well-being, and the cultures of Indigenous peoples, communities, pastoralists, and smallholder women and men? So unless we do things differently, and I don't just mean how we're living on the planet and the choices that we are making around that affect the biophysical conditions of the planet, but also how we define solutions. So we don't work in new and more equitable ways to find solutions, the people who have always been among the most marginalized populations will continue to be so. And that includes the Indigenous peoples and local communities that control somewhere around half of the world's land area, and especially the women in those communities. So for land-based solutions, we need to turn our thinking on its head. Maybe we need to listen more than to lead. Maybe instead of asking Indigenous peoples for free, prior, and informed consent to our solutions, we need to ask them what solutions work. Instead of benefit sharing plans that we design on the investments and profits of our carbon emissions projects, we should think about Indigenous peoples and local communities as investment partners, or they're the investors. They're the ones on the ground, and we offer our partnership to them.